Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Nicole Pfeiffer. I'm the Director of the Center for Regional Development at Bowling Green State University, and I have been asked to present to you the research analysis and strategy building process we conducted in partnership with Lucas County Public Library and the Toledo Regional Digital Equity Coalition to address digital equity in our community. To start off, I'd like to give proper acknowledgement and thanks to my staff members who did this work. The project lead on this was Lisa Lawson. The visual storyteller and designer was Vanessa Oz. The statistician and data analyst was Bafor Koda, and our graduate assistant was Lydia Applin. This process took about 1 year and was divided into two phases. The first phase was the digital equity analysis, which was the area where we really assessed the state of digital connectivity in our community, as well as the availability of digital resources. The second phase was then the strategy building based on the data that we had compiled and the information we had received from the phase 1 analysis. As I said, this work was executed by us, CRD at BGSU, and our partner at Toledo Lucas County Public Library, with oversight and feedback from the Toledo Digital Equity Coalition. The Toledo Lucas County Digital Equity Coalition is listed here. This coalition has been working on the issue of digital connectivity and resource access in our community for several years. And in partnership with Toledo Lucas County Public Library, approached this work and contracted us to do the analysis for them. This group has, as part of this process, we helped the group develop a mission and vision to guide the work and to steer it into the future. The vision is in order to participate fully in today's economy and society. All area residents will have access to critical digital tools such as devices, affordable high-speed broadband, and knowledge of how to use these to thrive at home, work, and school and within our community. The mission then the coalition seeks to reduce and eliminate barriers to digital access and literacy so that all residents of Toledo Lucas County may have the capacity needed for civic and cultural participation, employment, lifelong learning, and access to essential services. So with this vision and mission in mind, we approach this digital analysis and the strategy building process. The digital equity analysis is a 3-step process with 4 main components. So the first step was the community scan. This included both a data assessment or situational analysis, as well as a resource inventory. The second step was an institutional needs assessment, and the third is a community needs assessment. I'll walk you in the following steps. Following slides, I'll walk you through each of these steps. Starting with the community scan. So to approach the community scan, we use the Broadband Ohio definition of internet access and digital equity. Digital equity is defined as equal access to digital technologies, including the internet, and access is defined as both availability of resources and the adoption of resources. Adoption includes affordability and digital literacy as defined on the slide infographic. In short, what this definition means is that we recognize that though there may be a provider that delivers internet connection to any given address, that does not necessarily mean that those who live at that address have the ability to connect to that internet due to barriers such as affordability or digital literacy. So when looking at availability and adoption of internet, we started with the FCC data on internet access and home and device home access. This data showed that 16% of Lucas County households have no access to internet at home, and about 12% have no devices at home. Further review of FCC and pre-collected data allowed us to identify which zip codes in the Toledo area had the least connectivity. These areas were dubbed as low connectivity hot zones and became the focus of further analysis as we move forward with the work. This designation was based on review of connectivity data, data on device access, upload and download speeds, as well as ACP eligibility and ACP adoption rates. Looking at device access a little more closely, you can see in the map here which census tracts within Lucas County have most device access and which ones have no device access. So those in dark blue are the census tracts which have the most households with device access. Those in red, orange, and yellow are those households that have, are those census tracts which have a greater number of households with no device access. As you can see, the darker red and orange concentration tends to be around the central city and where those high, low connectivity hot zones were identified. Looking at no internet connection, you see a similar trend with more of the dark red and orange in the central city area near the identified low connectivity hot zones. Looking at upload and download speeds for the county, the median download speed was 45 and the median upload speed was 5. To put that into context as to whether that's good or bad, here are the minimum download speeds needed for various activities, common activities. So things like browsing, general internet browsing, email, or social media take very, very little. Mbps, where things like downloading files, streaming videos, take quite a bit more. So this is important because we have to recognize that whether or not you have an internet connection is only one piece of the equation. The other piece of the equation is whether you have a high enough quality connection to do the things that you need or want to do with the internet. Looking at download speeds across our county, again, the red are those that have least access or the lowest download speeds, and those in the blue are with the highest download speeds. Again, you can see that there is a great concentration of low download speeds towards the center of the city in those low connectivity hot zones. Also, there are some outlying areas in the county where the speeds are quite low as well. Similarly, when we look at upload speeds, again, though upload speeds are a little bit more ubiquitous across the community, we do see patches of red and orange in those low connectivity hot zone zip codes. When we look at the census tracts in terms of their rankings, we've listed the bottom 10 for both download and upload speeds. And so you see that the bottom 10 go from about 16 down to 5 for download speeds. So not enough to download a file or a video in most cases. And you have upload speeds from 4 to 1. Again, limiting in those bottom 10 census tracts, quite limiting upload and download speeds. Looking at some variables around ACP adoption here. So ACP, or Affordable Connectivity Program, is a federal program that provides subsidy to households for internet connectivity. This subsidy includes two parts. So households who are ACP eligible are eligible to have a $30 a month discount for internet access, as well as a free device. The type of device is variable depending on the provider. Eligibility for ACP is based on median household or on household income, and a good indicator or proxy for that is SNAP benefits. So the ACP threshold is 200% of the poverty line. So households earning 200% or less are eligible for ACP. Similarly, households in that same range are eligible for SNAP. So we use SNAP here as a proxy for what percentage of our population within each zip code was ACP eligible, which is relatively conservative because ACP is a little bit lower threshold than SNAP. So as you see here in the lowest zip codes, those in the low connectivity hot zones, the percentage of the population that should be eligible, 53%, 40, 44, 43, 37, 26%. So relatively high proportions of eligible populations based again on these median household incomes. And then the percentage of adoption for ACP or ACP enrollment. So in most cases, you have quite a bit fewer households who are adopting ACP than those who are enrolling in SNAP, which indicates that ACP benefits are being underutilized in our low connectivity hot zone areas. So moving on from the community scan, we have the community asset inventory. So once we assess sort of where the connectivity issues, connectivity device access, and internet quality issues were in our community, we also wanted to then look and see where the resources were in our community to help our citizens or residents address those issues. So here what you see are a listing of the desired types of programs or resources, things from home connectivity support or subsidies, device support, essential digital literacy programming, digital literacy programming for education, digital literacy skills for basic job skills, and as well as more advanced workforce development tech-based trainings. And then the potential stakeholder groups that would be interested in accessing these resources, from families to students to senior or adult learners, workforce reentry, nonprofit services, etc. And we've identified here who is providing services for each of these populations, if there are services in each category being provided. As you can see, there are a number of areas where there are no resources being provided for specific needs or for specific populations, and that a number of the resources that are being provided by the same entities, by Toledo Lucas County Public Library or the Toledo Public School System, or JFS. Next, after assessing the resources available, we wanted to look and see the perspective of both institutions and community members on the barriers to access and the quality of access for our residents. So starting with institutions, we wanted to engage organizations that provide necessary and essential services to our residents. Healthcare, social services, community development programs, K through 12 education, workforce development, and career prep or higher ed services. Knowing that these services are essential to high quality of life and are needed by many of our community members. We reached out to 344 organizational members to ask about connectivity and connectivity barriers, received 113 responses from that 344 connections. And those 113 responses covered all of those represented groups, from healthcare to higher ed prep. In this survey, we focused on 4 predominant concerns. One is, how do those organizations utilize web-based or portal-based tools to deliver services? Whether those services were being utilized by community residents and clientele, whether groups express barriers to internet access, device access, or digital literacy, and what types of connectivity support would they like to see to overcome some of those barriers. The data and the graph shown here is what proportion of the clientele, students or patients, the language was changed depending on the type of organization we were sending this survey to, but what proportion of their clientele utilize online portals for services. And so you can see that it's quite variable across the organizations, but the largest proportion fell into this 25 to 50%, meaning that 25 to 50% of their clientele were accessing services online. And you had another 30% who said somewhere between 50 and 75% of their population were accessing services online. So a pretty decent proportion. The next question was about perceptions of internet access and device access. So we asked these organizations to infer whether they felt that their clientele were able to access the internet or devices to leverage the services available to them based on their experiences. The distribution here shows you that in terms of internet access, which is highlighted in blue, the vast majority felt that their clientele had average or poor internet access. And similarly, in terms of device access, the distribution was a little bit heavily weighted towards poor, though a little bit higher number thought that their device access was good. In general, most responses are weighted towards the average to poor distribution. After that, we asked them about the ways that they use online services or portals to support their organization. So the first piece of this was just asking them how they use them in order to, if they use them to reduce staffing demands, resource demands, essentially getting to the driver of using online resources. 29% said that they use online resources to reduce staffing demands or resource demands a little bit. 25 said a moderate amount, and 22% said a lot. Another 20% also said that they don't use these resources at all. Following that, we asked them if they rely on online portals or applications for the provision of services, meaning is there some services that you provide that you can only access online? 35% said that there's a moderate amount of their services provided online. 22% said that a lot of their services are accessible online, and 20% said a great deal were accessible online. Moving on to the community needs then. Here we took a very broad approach to community engagement to try to make sure that we could assess the community needs from as broad of a sample of the population as possible in order to assess where the needs were and how the things that we were seeing in the data were reflected in the perceptions of the public. We did this through the distribution of an electronic survey. That survey was distributed predominantly through the library computer system for patrons of the library to take as they use the computer library or the library computers. We also distributed the electronic survey through QR code that was put on social media posts, that was put on, or the link was distributed via social media posts. The QR codes were distributed via paper mail flyers and through posters for community events. We also distributed paper surveys at community events so that folks could sit down and take the survey on the spot as they were participating in these community events. And for those who have had barriers to survey participate, both digital or paper survey participation, we did on the spot in-person interviews to review the survey questions. We partnered with a number of community organizations to be able to provide the survey and the interviews to folks at community events in their neighborhoods and around the places where they lived. We leveraged a number of children's activities and art to try to draw participants in and provided snacks and small incentives for community members to participate in the surveys and in the interviews. Here's just a couple of photos, a little insight into one of the events. This is the haunted Halloween event put on by the Toledo Arts Commission on Adams Street. Here we did spin art with children or adults, anyone. And while they were doing the art, we had their companions, parents, etc., do the survey. And so it was a fun way to keep children engaged while mom and dad took a survey, or vice versa, to keep mom and dad busy while their friends took a survey. Overall, we had 656 responses from community members. And the summary of results showed us largely what we had deciphered, or confirmed largely what we had deciphered from the previous analysis. So internet connectivity was relatively high overall, but variable across the community, with distinctions being around socioeconomic status and place of residence. There was limited capability devices that were broadly available. A lot of people had tablets and data-based devices, but the device capability was a concern. Affordability was also a concern that came up by many residents in the survey results. Computing skills were desired, as well as a lack of ACP knowledge and adoption among eligible residents. Diving into these results a little bit more deeply, again, you see high levels of internet connectivity. 72% of respondents said that they had internet access at home in the hot zones, and 91% in the non-hot zone zip code said they had internet access at home. When we looked at the concerns, so the top 5 concerns that came out, broadband affordability, 19.5% responded that that was a concern. Digital literacy, 16.56%. Lack of device access, and this was task appropriate device access, not just holistically, 14.57%. Digital security, 13.25%, indicated there were concerns about scams, hackers, identity theft, etc. And the 5th concern was device affordability, coming in around 13.25% of respondents. Looking at affordability, we asked folks how much they paid monthly for internet. 31% said somewhere between $50 and $75, where 24% said somewhere between $75 and $100, and 18% said somewhere between $100 and $125+ a month for internet access. In terms of digital literacy training, almost 18% of respondents said that they would be interested in basic internet or computer literacy classes. In addition to that, interview respondents and some open-ended survey responses indicated a desire for or an interest in digital job readiness skills, or slightly more advanced computing skills, so that they could use basic software. When we asked about at-home devices, again, very high overall access. In the respondents in the hot zones indicated that 94% indicated that they had device access at home. Respondents in non-hot zone zip codes, 89% indicated that they had devices at home, so relatively ubiquitous access to general devices at home. Again, the response and the concern was more about whether the devices that they had could do the things that they needed to do or desired to do on the internet. So based on this feedback, we worked with the strategy committee, or the Digital Equity Coalition, to develop a 5-year strategy for improving connectivity and digital equity in Toledo Lucas County. To do this strategy building process, we went through a 4-step strategy building approach, including the identification of strategic priorities and strategic goals, the identification of some objectives and success measures for those objectives, development of some action steps or an implementation plan to deploy those strategies, and finally, a way to look at evaluation or success around each of those strategic goals and objectives. The priorities identified were connectivity, digital literacy and capacity building, device access, and network building. In priority A, connectivity, there are 2 goals. Goal 1 is to increase ACP adoption by 15% in low connectivity hot zones through targeted campaigns and the Greater Toledo Digital Equity Coalition through their collaboration. Goal 2 around connectivity is to advocate to local, state, and federal elected officials regarding regulation, infrastructure, and affordability of broadband to, again, decrease those barriers and create better access and affordability of broadband connection. Around priority 2, digital literacy and capacity building, 2 goals. The first goal is to provide courses and literacy needs assessments for individuals such that residents can identify what skills they most desire and how to access resources to enhance those skills. And secondarily, goal 2, to provide digital navigators at the community level to help residents identify programs, resources, and skills training available to them in the community. Priority C, or priority 3, devices. In this, we have 1 goal, which is to increase device access, ownership, and utilization across the community, including increasing appropriate device ownership as identified in the low connectivity hot zones, those devices that folks need to do the things that they would like to do. And then the last priority, network building, we have 1 goal, and that is within 1 year, community members and digital equity advocates will know exactly to whom to turn for resources around affordable connectivity, training, and access to devices. This is about information sharing and connection and making sure that there is a solid referral network such that folks who need resources can turn to others to get those resources and know to whom to get more additional information. So that's the end of the presentation and the strategy building process. As this process unfolds, updates will be provided. All of this information, including the full report, so the outlining this process and the results of this process are available on the Toledo Lucas County Library's website in the Connect area, where you can see all of the information about the Digital Equity Coalition, as well as the work around strategy building and the next steps that are being taken to implement this strategy. Thank you for your time. If you have additional questions and concerns, you can of course reach out to the folks listed on that page at the Toledo Lucas County Public Library or to us at the CRD, and we'd be happy to assist you with your questions, concerns, or needs. Thank you.